It's game week 2. I'm back in Milan. We're starting to get into the flow of things. Welcome to the Serie A show. As always, my name is Rory. I'm joined by my very good friend Adam, and we have a friend of the show back, Fede Farco. Fede, how are you doing, man?
Hello, Rory. Hi, Adam. All good. How about you? Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. It's pretty humid in Milan at the moment, but apart from that, it's all good. Adam, how are you doing, man?
Yeah, keeping very well. Probably less high temperatures in the UK compared to you guys in Italy, but we're getting into the prime part of the season, aren't we? Game week 2, and we had some interesting results to say the least, especially in Serie A, right?
It was an exciting one. It was an exciting weekend. I feel like obviously the headlines were kind of Empoli getting their first ever win in Rome. I
Yeah.
think it kind of caught the headlines. Obviously Lazio slipping against Udinese, who we've predicted to be a bit of a surprise package this year. Milan continuing to struggle, and of course Shea Adams and his home debut making an instant impact, which is exactly what we wanted to see. But before we get into the actual football, obviously this week a kind of calcio giant and English football giant sadly passed this week. We're of course talking about Sven-Göran Eriksson. It's been coming for a while. Obviously, it's been well publicized, his battle with illness. My first impressions were just not many people get to choose how they go, right? Not many people get to kind of see the appreciation and the effect they've had on people's lives. Usually all that stuff comes after you've gone, unfortunately. And I think for Sven, it was just really beautiful that he got to see how much he meant to a lot of people across the world. And I think it really showed footballers like sometimes it's easy to forget that it can be a power for good, and it does mean a lot to people. And I think a lot of those videos and those scenes kind of reminded me that football can be a power for good at times. But Fede, obviously you're a Lazio fan. He's a giant in Lazio history. Like, what are your memories tied to this great man?
Yeah. I mean, there would be a lot to say, to be honest, but I won't bore you too much. But yesterday I published an Instagram story and was like, I just wrote. I know you, Ben, said we shouldn't be sad, but just grateful for what you've done. The point is, I'm feeling a bit sad because basically he contributed to the best years of my life, to be honest, because it was 1997, 2000, and then while I was growing up, and Lazio was top of the league, fantastic team and everything, and I had the feeling obviously that it wasn't going to be forever because we're not one of the top 3 clubs anyway, and I was there avidly recording on my VHS every moment of those 3 seasons because I knew those moments were not coming back. And so it's full of nostalgia, really. And but I've got this, for instance, which is his
Wow.
signature. And didn't remember it was at the Rome airport, July 98.
Wow.
And then there was another occasion, this one, and basically these are all the Lazio players, because when we went to Florence and Fiorentina were wearing that kit that Adam is wearing now, in 2000, and I went there outside the Lazio hotel, and I remember Sven coming and greeting my mother. I know, an incredible gentleman. So it was there, my mom saying, "Hello, how are you? How you do?" That. And then we followed the team around the hotel because they were having a walk around Florence, basically, before that game. And Lazio eventually drew that game 3-3, and then Juve won at Inter the following day 2-1. So Lazio were again 5 points adrift, and it felt like it was over. But basically, Sven was the only one who actually kept believing every game, and that was exactly what Lazio needed those seasons, because they had a fantastic team, fantastic squad, but because of the environment and the fans and the media and everything, they needed somebody like him, to be perfectly balanced, not feeling too overwhelmed in victory, not feeling too down or too low in defeat. So that's exactly what Lazio needed. And if you think about Rome as well as a city, it's incredible to think that the last 3 league titles were won twice by 2 Swedish managers, because it was Lidholm and for Roma, and then Eriksen for Lazio, and then Capello in between. So it's mad if you think about it. It's like Rome definitely needs a Swedish manager to do the job, because that's the only kind of personality that can provide a good balance to the place.
It's an incredible legacy he's left on that city, and especially on Lazio. But Adam also, like, as it hit me really hard when I saw it on the news, honestly. And I think as an England fan, I kind of looked at it afterwards and was like, he was the first England manager I properly kind of remember, if you know what I mean. I was quite young for Bobby Robson, and like he's the first one I properly remember. And he was, like, I think Fede summed it up there, he was that calming influence on what is quite a chaotic job, right? Like, what are your memories from Sven and his legacy for the national team? Obviously, the first non-Englishman to manage the England team as well, right?
Yeah, and I kind of reminisce, and I suppose it's really poignant about how Lazio's kind of commemoration video came out as well, how they reminisced about that time at Lazio and how he got them to the first Scudetto, for example. The other elements being the Coppa Italia as well, and what was the UEFA Cup as well. Incredible moments when you look at that squad. And what's really, I suppose, poignant about Sven is, and it's been alluded by a lot of his ex-players, is that he gave them self-belief. He gave them kind of an understanding about true appreciation and all about kind of life abilities, And I think that that's the kind of message that I'm getting, that whilst there was this kind of persona with Sven, that he was kind of a grandmaster at his role in some respects. He gave players a lot of love and attention. He made them believe in themselves, and whether that be from the Lazio days or Gothenburg days, for example, to even when he was at England, I think he reminisces about maybe that England squad. He should have done more with that team in terms of ability. But if you look at the kind of videos that a lot of those players did in the kind of build up to his death, they all kind of talked positively. And you didn't hear anyone talk negatively about Sven as a personality. I suppose what stands out from his time in England was what he did with the 5-1 results against Germany, for example. That was incredible as a result in itself. And it gave the nation a lot of belief that, he got this group of players playing together. And that was something that was missed in the previous reigns with the likes of Kevin Keegan, for example.
Yeah.
So for someone to come in with a bit of pessimism from the kind of English fan base as well, because they weren't too trusting of this kind of individual at the time, despite what he achieved club level. It's incredible kind of gratitude. And I suppose you can see even fans applaud Sven. They don't have a bad word, despite the fact that maybe they felt they should have done better with him. But nothing but positive words about Sven. And it's incredible to think what he achieved in that space of time as well, right, Rory?
Yeah, it's just a massive loss for football, and I think it's. I wanted us to have a quick minute to talk about it and give him the respect and kind of just say, go well, Sven. But we're going to take a very, very quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about game week 2 in Serie A. We will see you on the other side.
And we are back. And more importantly, let's start by kind of reminiscing about the results that did take place in this Serie A game week 2. And Rory, we're going to start off with Parma. Fantastic win against Milan. 2-1 win, courtesy of some fantastic play by Fabio Peccia and his team. What was kind of striking was, I suppose, how Milan kind of caved in. They really did struggle against the press of Parma, the likes of Dennis Mann, who I've been touting for a little while, but he's definitely showing he is the man at Parma at the moment. But Valentin Mihela as well was a constant menace for Milan and their defence. And I suppose it raises a lot of questions at the moment about Milan. I appreciate it's only 2 games already being played, but against the likes of Torino and potentially against Parma, they're expected to take at least more than the points that they have so far on the board. And there's a wider kind of consensus amongst the kind of Milan fan bases that actually the results aren't proving to be great. The performances themselves haven't maybe been any improvement on what Stefano Pioli achieved last season. And I suppose, question marks about whether Fonseca is the man to take Milan going forward. I mean, Based on that performance alone, I mean, Rory, are you starting to maybe question Fonseca at the moment at Milan? And should we be concerned at this stage?
Well, I think pre-season we were quite openly questioning Fonseca and why they appointed him. Like, it always seemed a bit odd to me that he was the man they chose. Like, obviously, he had a kind of patchy record at Roma, and he's always been a manager who's developed players, but not really achieved as much as he possibly could have with the teams he's been in charge of. I think the only saving grace for Pioli, and I'll see if Fede agrees, is that for me, we're seeing the same problems with the players that we saw under Pioli. Like, what we saw in that performance at Parma was a lack of pressing, was a lack of kind of effort without sounding too, proper football man vague about it. Like, there was a lot of like the same kind of half-arsedness we saw under Pioli. So I'm not sure if it's entirely Fonseca. I think he's trying to implement a bit more of an attacking style of football than Pioli may have done. But I feel like when you look at the application, like there's the clip that's gone viral of Rafa Leao just not pressing and not running. Like, when you see the things like that, you think, well, these are issues within the squad that need addressing, and maybe it's not entirely on Fonseca. But I'm still fully of the belief that they made the wrong appointment at the beginning of the season, and they could have made a much more exciting and diligent appointment than they have. Like, Fede, are you seeing the same issues in the squad, or do you think it's more leaning towards Fonseca not inspiring those players?
Exactly. Yeah. I think they definitely need probably another manager to steer them on. I mean, it would be simplistic to think, why doesn't he change tactics as well? Because, moving on with the same system as well, maybe players feel like Pioli has never left somehow. And so they need someone who actually, brings a new kind of mentality and attitude into the club, and or help them, as you were saying. Fact that Rafa Leao hasn't changed attitude is definitely down to the manager. He needs someone that provides that kind of leaping mentality, making sure the player actually grows up. Because every time we see Rafa Leao play, and I think it's the same for you, you think, I cannot help but think, imagine if this player had that kind of continuity or consistency or mentality, will score lots of goals, maybe brace every game. Because it's incredible in the 1v1s and all situations, whereas they definitely need someone. So it doesn't surprise me that me living in Monza but then working in Milan is probably the same for you, Rory. Talk to Milan fans every day, and it doesn't surprise me that they're already thinking about Allegri or someone else to come in, or there is another faction thinking, right, why don't we actually get the full disaster, like losing the derby 8-0 in a couple of weeks' time. So it's a complete disaster, and then they have to redo it again, everything in just by September, by the end of September, because it will be a complete disaster. I don't think it will be that bad, but it's difficult to support Milan at the moment, it seems.
And like, Adam, defensively, they're just all over the place. Like, they've not really had that defensive solidity at all. Obviously, Maignan has had his injury issues, and it's not entirely on him, but they've not really, like, Tomori had that really good first season when they won the Scudetto, then hasn't really hit the level since then. Kalulu is kind of, he's gone now, right? Or he's kind of still decided he has gone. There's Thiaw, and then they've brought in Pavlovic, and he looks quite promising, but like, they just can't get that defensive unit settled, right? And I think it's obviously it's that basis, that foundation that they need to build on, and then from there you can maybe, like, when you're conceding, like, they're well worked goals from Parma, right? But they're moves that a team like Milan should be able to deal with, right?
Yeah, certainly. I think the balance of that defense is where they're going wrong at the moment. They need to find something to get behind, I suppose, in terms of formation, because right now, even if we kind of highlight that second goal, for example, yes, there's been a lot highlighted around Rafael Leao and how he released the ball. That kind of went to Almqvist, and he kind of does a crossfield ball to Marco Cancelliere to kind of put beyond Mike Maignan. But you have to think about, right, your left back, Theo Hernandez, who likes to bomb forward, really not picking up his markers and dropping off, and then you're relying on the likes of Tomori, who hasn't had a solid foundation from last season. Pavlovic is coming in to help solidify in some respects. And then you've got David Calabria, who I think for a lot of the Milan fan base, they poke fun at. They don't see him as maybe someone that can have the longevity of some of the players that they have in that squad. They kind of expected him to be evolved, and they brought in Emerson Royale, and look, we don't know what's happened there as well. Like it's a bit of a car crash at the moment.
It doesn't help. Purchase, Emerson Royale. I'll be honest, very odd transfer. I've never been convinced by him. But
for me, though, personally, Rory, I'd say it all stems from that midfield as well, because how kind of placid and easy it was for Parma to kind of penetrate them, with the wingers in Man and Mihaela on one side, between them, they kind of had this constant press, and Milan didn't really know how to answer to that. And it seems like as soon as they've got a bit of pressure, they kind of fold, and it's far too easy for them. So I think they're relying on the likes of Benacer to help them out. And we saw for parts of last season when Benacer, he wasn't there, they really did struggle for someone that was going to stick their foot in sometimes. And I know Youssef was one of them, for example, Munsa, who they expected him to maybe fill that gap. But unfortunately, it's not transitioned that way. And I feel that they're very heavily focused towards the attacking end of the pitch. But when it comes to the counter-attack, they really do come undone. And that's where I suppose last season they had those kind of shock results, and Pioli got a lot of stick for the results against Inter in particular during his tenure as well, because they've been just so easy to work themselves out. And I think a lot of it is culturally, but also it stems to the manager in terms of how they approach it and whether they have plans to kind of counteract it as well. And I don't think Fonseca really sometimes reads the game as quickly as some other coaches, and potentially that's maybe the cause of concern right now, is that Milan came in with this kind of huge projects under Zlatan, and actually it's starting to fall apart at the moment. So like we've even said offline, Yassin Adli's looks like he's already confirmed a move to Fiorentina on the loan. Now, for me, he's a player that has a lot of heart. Every time he's played for Milan, he looks really exciting, but for some reason they don't seem to have trust behind him. Tommaso Pobega is another one that recently went on loan to Bologna. Now, I'm not saying he could do a better job than some of the midfielders they've got, but again, he kind of gives you a bit more kind of fight in that kind of team. And I struggle to kind of work out where Fonseca is going with this. But yeah, certainly a lot of question marks about the team in terms of their approach, but also basically the tactics and how they're approaching these games as well.
Well, I think it's an interesting point in the midfield. And like, Fede, I'll get your thoughts on it, because Yassin Adli is a player I really like. I think every time I've seen him, he's very creative. His passing range is very good. He's very dynamic. But there are midfielders on the bench there. So obviously they've brought in Fofana, and Benacer was on the bench, but obviously he's kind of getting back to full fitness. Do you think that when these players come in, it's just a matter of time that midfield will sort itself out and they will get a bit more solid? Or do you think there's still issues there? Because I think Adam was right in pointing out that they were just far too easy to run through.
Yeah, they should. But also, I want to say something about Parma, because, they... I attended a game last season in Parma, but that was top versus bottom. It was Parma v Lecco, and it was Serie B. But you can see that they've been working together for a while. Whereas Fonseca is trying to build his own ideas just now recently. So I think the victories that they had in preseason friendlies were probably an illusion, because they beat Barcelona,
Chelsea. Right,
Real Madrid. So okay, brilliant, what a season for Milan. But basically it was just an illusion. And now they're going to Rome and play Lazio on Saturday, and it's not going to be easy feat either. As I said, Derby is round the corner as well. Then Champions League is starting. So they as you said, it feels like it's already kind of crumbling down. And it made me laugh today when I saw a meme. I don't know if you've seen it. Of Ibra next to Cardinale, striking a pose similar to Buzz Lightyear next to Woody. and that made me laugh. But yeah, as you said, Ibra is kind of deciding everything at the moment at the club, and but they need maybe something else. As you said, there was rumors just this evening that they were probably going to try for Osimhen, because if you think about it, also in terms of center forward, they brought in Alvaro Morata, but then if he doesn't play, Jovic is his replacement. So he's probably not enough, to be honest. But then, also that probably will go to Chelsea, I think. But it doesn't surprise me that they actually tried because they definitely need someone there up there as well, not only in midfield, and maybe if they even change system, they could benefit from that. But they still have a bit of time.
Yeah, I saw a Milan fan today saying that Milan need to kind of remember who they are and go for those big players, be a bit more ambitious in the players that they can get, because they are AC Milan, right? They're one of the biggest teams in world football. And he said, like, it was a bit of a thread, and he was talking about it kind of feels like we could end up back in, or they could end up back in that kind of banter era where they're getting those mid players and it's just a bit of an odd squad. But most players in the world, I always remember the interview with Tomori when he joined Milan. He was like, I ring my dad and I'm like, Dad, I play for AC Milan. Like, it's incredible. And I think they need to remember a bit that they can be that ambitious and kind of get, I think Osimhen would be incredible. I'm really intrigued to see where he ends up in general, to be honest. But with Parma, you're right. This is a project that's been building for a while. These are players that have been playing together for a while. I remember many years ago, we had Emmanuel Roșu on, the Romanian journalist, who was very excited about Man and Mihaila. So it's great to see them in the league. And Adam, obviously, now last year I predicted Lazio to win the Scudetto and got it massively wrong. This year I predicted Parma to get relegated. It looks like I could be wrong again, right?
Could be a lot of egg on your face at this moment in time, yeah.
Not
because
again.
The way,
Yeah.
not again, typical. But yeah, no, I actually had Parma to be maybe the surprise package for this season. I personally felt off the form of what they displayed in Serie B. There's something exciting there that they're creating. Obviously, we saw various different nights in the Coppa Italia over the last 2 seasons. They took, for example, Inter Milan 2 seasons ago to extra time. There has been something bubbling up down there, and they've got some exciting players as well at the same time. Like you mentioned, Man and Mihaila, we've got the young Pole Benedcek, who is kind of a tricky winger as well, for example. I like Valentin, who didn't play in this match, but again, there's a lot of potential within that squad. And, it seems with the coach that they've got at the moment as well, he's something that is trying to build something as a team. So, yeah, please keep an eye on Parma this season, Rory. We'll see where they end up. It's too early to say, right? But
I'm going to have to. And they've brought in a little bit of Serie A experience with Cancellieri and Almqvist. They've brought in a bit of players that, like Almqvist, we liked when he was at Lecce as well, right?
Yeah.
So it's good for them. A massive result for them. Worrying times for Milan. But yeah, their run of fixtures, their upcoming fixtures is pretty scary as well, with the Milan derby just over the horizon. But next, we're going to move on to our next game, which was, or is, Conte making his debut at the Maradona and winning 3-0 against Bologna. I did not see a win this convincing coming, I'll be honest. I thought Bologna would put up a bit more of a fight. My reservations about Italiano maybe kind of fair at the moment. But Fede, were you surprised by how convincing a win this was by Napoli? And Kvara really decided to turn up, right?
Yeah, I kind of was, because I didn't expect it to be that resounding. Although knowing Conte, obviously, after losing at Verona with that result, they definitely wanted to play another game, probably on Monday, because that was the only way to make it up. And then also his celebration was incredible, and especially because I think that goal that came, I think it was probably first or second goal, you could see was kind of, they probably tried in training, and you could see that Kvaratskhelia as well is improving his kind of quality as well, in terms of contributing to the attack, which is great. And then I didn't expect that. But if you think about Bologna as well, it's a massive step back in terms of I think they tried to shot the goal 22 times against Udinese in the first game, and then just once at Napoli, which is really bad for them. And then again for them as well, Champions League behind the corner. I expected that to happen for Bologna this season. To be honest, I don't. It's still early doors, but it's going to be difficult to to manage all the all those games, and especially because you've never been at that level, and then your manager leaves, and some of your top players leave. So it was always going to be difficult anyway, to be consistent, to repeat yourself the way they did last season anyway. But yeah, fair play to Napoli and to Conte, and the new players coming in from the Premier League, as we know, McTominay, Gilmour, I think, for Brighton, and now Lukaku. And I think Lukaku is really, I mean, Conte is the right manager for Romelu, because I remember his first day at Inter, when I was at Inter, and we told him, have you actually trained under Conte, because it's going to be tough? And he said, yeah, well, don't you think I've been training in England as well? And I said, you don't know what you're saying. And then, and I think that season was best of his career, because he lost weight, and he was fast and sharp, and he was great. And then I think if he manages to bring back that kind of fitness level to his game, it's going to be perfect match again. So and always remember, they don't have Europe, of course. So they have time to focus on the league, which is very good for them, to be honest.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. But Adam, this performance between this and the game against Hellas Verona was like night and day. Like, what do you think it was that was so different? Was it just we're playing at home, we can't get away with this, or do you think it was like there was more to it than that? Because I just saw it as players actively kind of a little bit scared in a good way of losing again.
Yeah. I think there's a combination of two things. There would have been the Conte factor, drilling in that it's important to get the win at home, especially, and to improve in terms of how they display themselves on the pitch as well, because, that was a travesty against Hellas, and, they made it easy. Whereas this time you saw a little bit more organization, a little bit more grit and determination about their play. I think the likes of Buongiorno, who didn't play in the first game, he shored up that defense, and that really did help, I think, in terms of the way they played. Juan Jesus is kind of the walking joke, isn't he, at the moment? But, this was never going to be a long-term strategy with Juan Jesus there. And look, I think there's other bits, David Neres coming on. He seemed to do more than, say, Politano did in the whole duration of that match. So that could be good competition for him. And, Kvaratskhelia looks up for it. I think they were just much more up for it in terms of the way they played, and stylistically they were playing to the right kind of tempo that Conte demands of his players, right? So I think that there's elements, and look, there probably is a question mark over some of the personnel right now, whether they're going to see their futures there in the near future. So again, that kind of gives them the impetus to kind of show to Conte, I still want to be part of your plans. I want to kind of be there. And I suppose, there's a lot of expectation with Napoli this season. And I'm sure those players know how it feels, especially in Naples. So look, great night. I think a word on Bologna. I struggled to see them kind of try and do and overachieve like they did last season. I think they're waiting for a few personnel to come through the door. We've got the likes of Samuel Ilim Jr. joining on loan. I think he won't be the last one through the door. If you look at the stats as well, they had the most amount of possession out of the two halves as well against Napoli. But the difference was the amount of chances they created and what they did with the ball. And I think that's the fundamental difference. And that's probably typifies Italiano, especially when you look at the reign at Fiorentina as well. They probably outdid teams with possession, but they didn't do enough with it. And I think that's probably the criticism of Italiano. So it'd be fascinating to see who he gets in at the end of this Mercato, and see if they can attract any players of real quality, because they've lost a lot of ability in terms of that team. It'll be interesting. Let's see what happens. But props to
I think
very good.
I think Italiano has an issue coaching strikers. I don't feel any strikers really thrive under him massively. I feel like when he was at Fiorentina, obviously he brought in the guy who he had at Spezia as well, Zola, and it was a complete disaster, right? He brings in Belotti, complete disaster. Like, I feel like he has a real issue getting the most out of strikers. Like, Fede, do you think this is something that he's going to need to figure out quickly? And is there going to be someone come in? Like, we know that Bologna's recruitment has been very good and consistently good. Like, do you think he is the right guy to be able to get the most out of an attack, though?
Yeah, it's a fair question, to be honest, because it's you can see a pattern repeating itself, and he probably needs to hire an attacking coach at some point. Because we know that Castro anyway is not Zirkzee. But when he brought in Zola, we all I thought, he got his own man, so he's definitely got to do well. But you said he didn't. So he's what you said, guys, is definitely right. I mean, he needs to do something in terms of training his forwards a bit more and find more solutions, because ultimately the attacking, well, the possession is there, the ideas are there, but then he definitely needs some more finishing, which ultimately cost Fiorentina those finals as well, in Europe and in Italy as well. In the end.
Yeah, completely. Well, yeah, Bologna, I think it is going to be a difficult season. You're looking at that team, obviously losing Calafiore, losing Xerxes. The midfield and attack just look completely different now. I love Orsolini, but he can't do it all on his own. He needs a little bit of help every so often. So an alarming result for Bologna, but a fantastic result for Napoli. And just a quick word on the assist from Kvaratskhelia for the first goal was just that pass was absolutely incredible. When he's properly in the mood and when he's decides to take a game by the scruff of the neck, he's honestly just a pleasure to watch. A really good but fortuitous goal, maybe. And then just seeing Giovanni Simeone come off the bench and score, I was like, I'm convinced he should still be starting for a team regularly. He's good enough to be a starting striker in Serie A. And I think whenever he comes on for Napoli, he does very well. So I'm always delighted to see him score. And yeah, David Neres off the bench. I put a thing on Twitter when they signed him. I was like, I'm not too sure. His numbers aren't fantastic. They spent quite a lot of money, but in terms of impact off the bench on your debut is very, very impressive, and obviously a really impressive assist. So yeah, good stuff for Napoli. Takes a bit of the pressure off Conte, and maybe the players have had a bit of an easier week this week. We can hope. But let's move on to the next game, and let's go for Adam, we might be getting something right for the first time in the history of the podcast. We've talked about Udinese potentially being a surprise package this year. Sorry, Fede, we'll come to you. We'll come to you for Lazio in a minute.
Makes sense.
He's come from Poland, Radojic, and he's having a pretty good impact and a huge performance and result from Udinese, and they're looking pretty exciting, right?
Yeah. I mean, this was kind of football that possibly brought over the Udinese kind of hierarchy, because obviously they saw his performance with Legia Warsaw against Aston Villa. But during his time in the Ekstraklasa in the Polish league, as it's called, the Legia side were kind of really exciting. And even before that, he was at Pogoń Szczecin, a team that's kind of considered outside of the bigger teams within Poland. And he got them into high positions, finishing third, finishing second, behind the leaders in the Polish league. So that goes to stem to show you his footballing philosophy and what he can bring. And obviously that's what the Udinese kind of hierarchy saw, is that, he's achieving this kind of quality of football with the types of players, and that's not to downgrade and downplay the Polish league, but naturally there is a slightly different kind of level with the Italian league. And, he's even picked players from Poland, the likes of Kallstrom, who he brought in from Lech Poznań, brought him into this squad. He had a fantastic match against Lazio in particular, but, he seems to be getting the whole team to kind of change their philosophy from last season, where they're, really struggling under Sutil, for example. It wasn't until Cannavaro came in very late on, and we thought that was pretty much the last roll of the dice for Udinese. And I think he's just brought in a kind of breath of fresh air. And obviously, this is with the likes of Lorenzo Luca still in the squad. He's getting the best out of him as well in terms of that formations. But you could see even the tenacity that they put against Lazio. Lazio kind of did struggle in parts because of how well they attack. Florian Tuvan for that second goal in particular, amazing run. Lazio defenders didn't know how to deal with it. And, I suppose that shows you the balance that he's bringing to that team. And it's certainly going to be interesting to see how Udinese cope against the slightly bigger sides. But equally, you can see from the first two games already so far that they are going about the business quite early to get as many points on the board, because they don't want to be stuck with draws again, Rory. That's the key.
Well, this is only one draw so far this year. So, 50% of their games, probably a little bit lower than the rate from last season. But yeah, I really enjoyed the Tovan goal. And he assisted the other goal for Luca as well, didn't he? So he had a key role in both the goals. Luca with a lovely little header there as well. Nice little finish. So yeah, exciting times for Udinese, and this is without Sanchez, right? They've got to wait for Sanchez to come back from fitness. But Fede, let's go to you. You've appointed a manager that me and Adam have been singing the praises of for a while, in Marco Baroni, doing an incredible job at Verona, right? How, if we look not just at this game for now, but in general, what are your first impressions, and how impressed / unimpressed are you?
Well, I had watched Lazio obviously during the preseason friendlies as well against Sansa Rostock and Southampton, and I liked what I saw. And then I attended the Venezia game in person, so I thought it was the right approach from the team in terms of tactical play and recruiting pretty well. Although Lazio still missing a creative midfielder, I think, and they don't really have a backup striker because Ali Dia, I don't think is any backup for Tati Castellanos, to be honest. I mean, but then you can see that the vertical play, the attacking play is just about right. I think they got the right players. So probably rumors of Arthur joining, I don't know, or Folarunsho from Napoli, which would be interesting, especially because he was born and bred at Lazio. So and I don't think it was that bad, the Udinese game, because as you were saying, guys, credit to Udinese and this manager. When Udinese appointed him, nobody really knew who he was, and but probably there are good chances they actually recruited eventually the right manager, since Luciano Spalletti in 2006. In 2005, in 20 years, we will win managers and have a chance. And Watford becoming priority over Udinese, and then eventually, they're finding their feet again in terms of Serie A, which will be good for them. So I think as you said, credit to them. But Lazio, especially when Udinese were reduced to 10 men, they had chances in the last 20 minutes. They tried to create chances. They hit the crossbar. They managed to do something in the end with the game. But obviously there were two soft goals, as you said. Brilliant Toven, the assist from the first, the second goal. But normally you wouldn't think he's really that kind of a stoppable player that can really run through your defense and score that kind of goal, which is, as I said, credit to him, but at the same time, I personally expect a bit more from Lazio defense in that case. And also in the first case, leaving Luca just by himself in the area is not really ideal, to be honest. So yeah, lots of things to be addressed. But now AC coming to town on Saturday, it's going to be between two slightly depressed teams, so it could be a draw. But let's see.
It's going to be a big result for someone, regardless of what happens. It's going to be a big result. It's going to be a big result. Nice. Well, yeah. Well, hopefully Udinese can continue on this impressive run, because they're a club that it's kind of been depressing just see them scrapping against relegation for so long. And yeah, their recruitment this year is quite exciting. Even a player like Lovric coming off the bench as well. It'd be good to see him get a bit more of an impact this year. And of course, keeping an eye on English players in Serie A. Keenan Davis coming off the bench as well. Really hoping that things start to click for him at some point in Udine. So one to keep an eye on there. So a huge result for Udine. Absolutely beautiful. Sorry, Fede. We're going to go up north and we're going to move on to Torino. Adam, Scottish players, they love Serie A. What can we say? They're just absolutely loving it over here at the minute. Shea Adams with a dream debut in Turin. Incredible stuff, right?
Yeah, beautiful. It must be the food that entices these Scottish players to Italy, right? But yeah, Shea Adams displayed the promise that I suppose a lot of the Turin kind of guys saw. And, he had a fantastic season with Southampton in the Championship. Yes, it is the Championship, but, when you've got momentum and obviously off the back of the Euros as well, I think there's a lot of qualities that suits kind of the way that Torino like to play. And it was interesting to see how well he kind of linked up with the players, in particular like Ilicic for that initial first equalizer after Matteo Retegui, should I say. This puts Atalanta ahead. But just also the fact that he reacts the quickest for that Duvan Zapata initial kind of shot and, taps in what is his first goal in Serie A. It was great kind of performance. But credit to Vanoli as well, again, because we called it out against Milan and how well that midfield with the intensity really did press the Milan defence and that midfield. And again, they did it against Atalanta, you know, a favoured Atalanta. It was only last week that I was saying Atalanta have won the transfer window because of the business that they've done. And, you know, they really did look like they struggled at times against Torino, should I say, because, yeah, there was parts where I was trying to watch it on my One Football app. Unfortunately, it was a bit intermittent for me. I don't know about you, Rory, but for the majority of what I did see of that match, Torino really did deserve it because they had the most amount of possession. They seemed to put Atalanta into a position that they're not used to. They're used to dominating games and used to like taking on teams. Whereas on this occasion, Vanoli, you know, brought in from Venezia, seems to have put in a different ethos to this team. You know, under Juric, I think there was maybe an acceptance in terms of certain games and the way it was going to be approached. But Vanoli's kind of put some breath of fresh air. And when you consider there's a bit of a protest as well for this match as well, because there's a protest against the ownership right now and the fact that they're not spending enough money. And you look at the business, we even questioned it ourselves. We said they might be hovering over that relegation zone because we don't know how well Vanoli's kind of ideas are going to be reciprocated by the players. And, you know, Raul Ballanova being sold just before the window is going to be shut. And that was a huge player in that respect. But yeah, he's turned it around. Look, you know, the 2 results so far, they see themselves in second place at the moment, you know, a lot of positivity. And maybe this year could be the year that actually
maybe they're going to push into Europe finally. Maybe they'll get there. But I think it's really like, it's a very, very important talent for a manager to be able to like quiet and noise. Now, obviously, there's an interesting thing because the owner of Torino owns Gazzetta dello Sport, so any problems that happen in Torino never get talked about anyway. But
it wasn't the favorite though, but it was like dismal.
Hidden at the back somewhere. But for him to be able to like quieten that noise regardless is a very impressive thing and get the most out of this squad. I really like that midfield 3. The Ricci, Linetti, and Ilic as a midfield 3, I really like. Ricci, I've liked since he was at Empoli. He was always a player I thought this is a guy that needs to play higher up in the league. And I think just his creativity and his ability to like retain possession is just fantastic. I really, really like him as a player. So I think that midfield 3 are really strong. And then you've got like a proven goal scorer in Duvan Zapata there who's always going to cause problems. Like Fede, they're kind of slowly building a decent team there, right? Against all odds.
I totally agree with you. And I think actually, start with, I think it was the game of the weekend, you know, to the Atalanta, because it was because of the intensity, because of the chances they created, both teams, you know, it was very similar to a Premier League game somehow, because in that respect, and surprisingly, I would say, but, you know, I really value what Vanoli is doing. And again, I knew him because, you know, I saw him working personally, you know, on the pitch when I was at Inter, and I could see his intensity, his passion with players. It was, you know, like if it was the manager with Conte at the same time, because, you know, the way they were actually getting, you know, the intensity into training. And, you know, when I knew he was appointed at Venezia and he was going to do a great job. And then, you know, I think Torino as well, just like Udinese eventually might have found the right manager for them to, you know, to bring them forward somehow. And also got to be honest, because I've got ex-colleagues now working at Torino. When I saw Che Adams' presentation video, you know, which was very simple but very effective at the same time, but I said, isn't that too much for this kind of player? Because, you know, you don't know what he's going to do. It's not like a super player. But eventually, you know, he's really adapting fast to life in Italy, and turns out they were right to do that video for him. So credit to them and credit to him and to Torino for doing well. Against the atmosphere and the kind of negativity that was in the stadium of the Atalanta game. You know, even if, you know, as Gasperini said, Atalanta now, in respect to Dublin from the Europa League final, he has 13 players less in comparison, but I think he's still a strong side anyway. So, you know, credit to Torino for that game and for both performances so far. And then now playing Venezia, so Vanoli coming against his former club. It's going to be an interesting matchup again.
No, I absolutely love it. Always, and I'm always happy when Torino fans are happy because I think they're the most like patient fans in the world living next door to Juve fans. It must be horrible, even though most of the Juve fans are in the south anyway. But if we talk about Adam, if we talk about Atalanta, is this just a little bit of lack of a full squad, a lot of new influence, growing pains? Like, it's nothing to be really alarmed about, is it?
No, I don't think in the grand scheme of things, they're going to have a lot of matches this season. They'll probably turn around their form as well. And look, sometimes you want a little bump in the road to remind yourself that you're not as high ability as potentially you think you are. But yeah, it will be a knock in, say, Gasparini's kind of aspirations, I suppose. He probably wanted to go through a good run of form prior to kind of the build-up in the season. But yeah, nothing to worry about at this stage. You know, they did create opportunities in this match, but, you know, Torino just did very well. They made sure that they didn't have as many quality chances in front of goal. And I think that's a lot of credit to the way Paolo Vanelli kind of set up Torino. So, yeah, it's just one of those games, unfortunately, that Gasparini came against an inspired Torino team that's full of faith, and, you know, they showed their ability on the day. So, yeah, it's one of those that I think they'll dust themselves off, and yeah, they'll pick themselves up.
But now playing Inter on Friday night, it's not going to be easy feat.
Big one.
Big match.
Yeah,
big one. I think Inter are starting quite slowly. Like, they've still got the results more or less, but they're starting quite slowly. So maybe this is a good time for Atalanta to play them and kind of put a marker down. But let's talk about the last game we're going to kind of focus on today. We're going to look at the other side of Rome as Empoli get their first ever win in the capital as they defeat Roma 2-1. It started off as quite a good week for the Giallorossi as Dybala sensationally turned down Saudi Arabia, kind of half pissing off the Roma owners. I think they wanted him off the wage bill, but he's decided to stay. The fans were delighted, but a pretty terrible ending to the week. Fede, let's talk about Roma. Maybe you'll enjoy talking about how terrible they were, but I don't know. They just looked a bit uninspired and a bit boring, right?
I think so. And yeah, it was a bit weird because, you know, normally under Mourinho seemed like, you know, the team were really inspired by, you know, sell-out crowds and fans being there. And also, you know, if you think they just, you know, in order to fill in the ground even more, they just reduced completely the size of the visiting section just, you know, to sell more tickets because of the Dybala choice and everything. So everything was really set up for them. And normally they found inspiration in this kind of atmosphere. But in fact, it seemed like they were more tense, or probably because, you know, they expected things to turn upside down some point, or, you know, to turn in their favor. So they probably didn't play with urgency in terms of the game, especially, you know, if you think last season they won the same feat 7-0 against Empoli. So maybe, you know, there is a kind of subconscious level, something, you know, kicking in and thinking, right, this is going to be easy. But yeah, it's never easy, especially at this stage of the season. To be honest, you can't really undervalue any team. And you know, Empoli just grabbed the chance because, you know, obviously we know Roma, they hit the post twice, one crossbar once. Yeah, so they were unlucky as well, if you think about it. But as you said, in terms of, you know, proposing, in terms of tactics, in terms of movement, they didn't really feel like they were dynamic enough. And then there's always a Roma side with Dybala and a Roma without Dybala. You could see in Cagliari as well, it was kind of the same. So, you know, they definitely need to adjust a bit more to life under the Rossi, I think.
Yeah, I think this is something I noticed in the game, because it was quite clear that they were kind of waiting for Empoli to press so that they could catch them. They could like break into the space that Empoli left, but that Empoli just kind of hung back and were like, no, we'll just wait here, don't worry. And I feel like De Rossi maybe, and obviously he's a very like young coach. This is his first full season in the league, right? But I feel like maybe there is a lesson there that he needs to try and figure out what this plan B is going to be when the game isn't really going how he's expected. Like, Adam, do you feel like they could have adapted a little bit quicker, or is it difficult to know when to adapt when you don't know which players are going to be available in which game, right?
There is that. I think I saw warning signs of what this could have happened in the previous game match against Calgary, where Calgary were very much end to end in terms of the approach. They were trying to catch Roma on the counter attack, and if they'd taken their chances a lot more, because I don't think the balance of the midfield and the defense for Roma is there. Like the likes of Paredes, for example, in this match against Empoli was absolutely atrocious. He was having an absolute stinker. But Cristante, I know he's one that you've defended quite royally a lot of the time last season in particular. I think he just, that doesn't really capture what De Rossi is trying to get with this kind of squad. And you can kind of see, even with the formation, they don't have a lot of width, so they're relying on the fullbacks to do a lot of the work. And the likes of, for example, Pellegrini, who I feel maybe should change his style of play, become maybe a regista potentially, because he kind of slows down a lot of the attacks. And when Dybala does come on, he adds that bit of quality up top. But, when you compare and contrast the two halves, you can see like Empoli really could have been ahead by a lot more than the solitary goal in that first half. They could have been 3 or 4 goals, and that would have been a shock. That's how bad, Roma did apply. And I question sometimes. You look at Ndicka, for example, he was brought in as a midfielder, but he's been played as a centre-back alongside Mancini. I don't know if that's maybe De Rossi thinking he's a ball-playing, defender, and potentially he can kind of create those opportunities by playing it from the back. But I just think he hasn't found the right blend for his team at the moment. So, Matteo Sule is a bit disappointing so far in the first 2 games. Dovbyk, for example, he might be getting into those areas, but actually he's not making the most of those opportunities necessarily at this stage. Now, you've got to give him time potentially, to get a better understanding. But I just fear for Roma that they haven't got the right kind of combination right now. And something that Fede kind of mentioned with Lazio is that creativity. I feel that creativity sometimes happens when Dybala comes on. Now, we know with Dybala and his kind of injury history, that is the real question mark for Roma. So going forward, are they going to be reliant on the likes of Sule to create those opportunities? I don't know. It just feels like at the moment they haven't got the right blend of players at the moment, maybe the right formation. Against Empoli, that you would have expected more, but even in that second half, they had, I think it was about 21 chances on the shot, and it took a substitute in Shmorodov, who isn't really fancied by Roma. He was
Uzbekistan's greatest ever player. Thank you very much. Uzbekistan's great. I will always hold a flame for Shmorodov. I'm not sure why, but he does score every so often. I always enjoy it. But I feel like with Dybala and Sule, you've kind of got 2 players who are fairly similar in profile. Now, obviously, Dybala is a lot more kind of like experienced and has done a lot more in the game, but I feel like they're quite similar style of players. And what you kind of alluded to it, they've got 0 width. You're depending a lot on those wing backs for any creativity out wide. And I think it just makes them maybe a little bit predictable at times. And when you've got a big physical striker like Dovbyk, who has kind of thrived on getting his head in the box and, like out muscling players, if you're wanting to get crosses in the box, you need wingers. And I don't think they've really got wingers at the minute. So I think there's definitely a few more moves for Roma to make in the market if they want to, for them to get the squad where they need it to be. But Fede, we do need to give Empoli some credit. Davide Nicola, the eternal magician of Serie A, continuing the work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we weren't expect. I mean, you couldn't really expect that, especially after the first game, which was a board draw against Monza, stalemate, which also depended on the state of the pitch, to be honest. But I mean, fair play to them, as you said. First time they actually won in Rome against Roma in their history, which is, just sensational. So it's, good style of football. Everything seemed to click on for them, to be honest. And also in terms of Roma, let me say, they play Juve next time, which is not going to be easy either. It's like Inter via Atalanta. So it's not a big game. But, for what we've seen from you as well so far, it's going to be worrying for them before the international break. And then it will feel like another season, completely different season, needs to start from 15th of September onwards for many teams, I would say.
Yeah. So I have just realized I wanted to give the credit to David and Nicola, but it is Diversa.
Because it's Diversa, is it? Yeah,
it is Diversa. I apologize, Diversa. I just we are a bit obsessed with David and Nicola, so I apologize there. But yeah, a massive win for Empoli there, and very impressive. But Fede, yeah, you quickly mentioned them there. Juventus quite quietly having a very exciting start to the season, right? Just quickly, like it's almost the opposite of what they had under Allegri. Like the Juve fans must be on cloud nine at the moment. It's kind of incredible to see if you don't despise Juve, right?
Exactly. I mean, when they actually recruited Motta, I remember thinking, right, okay, is this guy supposed to be associated with Inter? So it's going to be tough, whenever you think, okay, Inter v Juve, what are they going to do? Are they going to upload him or not? Because ultimately he's an Inter legend. But now, moved on to Juve, which was a perfect career opportunity, which, made sense for him in the end. But at the same time, I thought, right, last time two times Juve actually tried to kind of revolutionize the style of play in the early 90s with Maifredi. And then I think they ended up 6th or 7th. And then with Sarri, things they never really clicked. So I thought, right, this is another attempt from Juve to kind of change the way they actually play in phase of old tradition. But ultimately, even when Simone Inzaghi came in, Inter are not really renowned for, the fantastic play. If you know Inter, the most famous for Catenaccio, rather, from their past and the way Mourinho won the treble, that kind of play. But in fact, even Simone Inzaghi revolutionized the perception of Inter historically, let's say. So there's no reason why Thiago Motta can do the same. And actually, what we've seen against Como and Verona actually shows positive signs in that respect. Especially for the young players, to be honest. I don't know about you, but
exactly. I was just saying the really impressive thing for me is this complete pivot towards bringing through these young players super quickly as well. Like obviously players like Yildiz, Sule, Mbangula, who scored in game week 1. Obviously Savona this week. Like it's been a very quick pivot and very effective. It's worked. And I think it's just, Adam, it's really fascinating to see a complete philosophy change in a club so quickly, right? And I think there should probably be more Serie A teams looking at instilling their B teams into the football pyramid at this point, because obviously Milan have, Atalanta have. I don't think Inter ever will, but a lot of other teams I think should be looking at it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly gives them the kind of game time opportunity that maybe they won't get if they carry on playing youth level football. And, even those kind of under 23 kind of style of football isn't kind of a real testament of what real football will kind of give them in that respect. So, yeah, I think there's a huge opportunity. And obviously, look, under the previous owners, the Agnellis, they kind of instilled this next-gen squad. They believed in the philosophy, and I think that was the long-term strategy, was to kind of utilize this and bring them through to the first team. Obviously, I think the opportunity arose because of the financial issues rather than anything else. I think it forced their hands. But it's certainly playing a benefit. If you look at what they've done in terms of transfer business, they've been able to balance the books as a result of this as well. So there's been a lot of benefits for the long run. But yeah, you have to credit Thiago Motta in terms of like being able to quickly instill this kind of philosophy and style of football. We knew what we were going to get from what he achieved at Bologna and even previous to that, Spezia as well. So there's a lot there to start off with, but obviously he needs to bring in the right personnel, and it looks like slowly but surely they are getting those players through the door now. Wouldn't surprise me if they do 1 or 2 more bits of businesses. It depends on who goes out of the window, and this could be one of those that it goes to the wire with the likes of Federico Chiesa, for example. It'd be interesting to see where his future lies. Obviously, I think if you look on balance of that squad over the last 2 matches, Chiesa actually fits that Juventus squad, which is mind-blowing. But unfortunately, the situation is political. It is what it is. They have to deal with it. And look, there's a lot of Juventus fans that are excited. We spoke about it briefly in the first episode. They are now getting really instilled with this. The kind of terminology is Juventus are cooking for once, And this is like you alluded to in the intro. It's a bit worrying from a non-Juventus fan perspective if you know about the history of Juventus.
But at least we might have like a fight for the Scudetto until the end.
Exactly.
This season,
Exactly. More exciting, right?
Yeah. It would be nice. It would be nice. Well, guys, that is all the games we're going to talk about this week. Just very quickly, I'm going to take you through the fixtures for game week 3. On Friday, it all kicks off with Venezia even taking on Torino. As Fede said earlier, their old manager going back to his old stomping ground. And the late kickoff on Friday, we have a huge one in Inter taking on Atalanta. On Saturday, we have Bologna taking on Empoli, Lecce versus Cagliari, Lazio taking on Milan. Fede, how are you feeling ahead of that game?
Yeah, draw.
Draw. Nice. That's the spirit. And we have Napoli taking on Parma. Then to wrap up on Sunday, we have Genoa taking on Verona, Fiorentina hosting Monza, Udinese hosting Como, and it finishes on Sunday evening with Juve against Roma. Absolutely massive game there. Well, that's it, guys, for this week. We hope you've enjoyed it. Fede, thank you for joining us. When our viewers and listeners want to find you, where can they find your stuff online?
Yeah, as usual on X, Fede Farco, but also on Instagram, Federico.Farcomeni, which is slightly longer, but you can find it there as well.
Beautiful. Well, thanks for coming on, and we'll have you on again. Hopefully, lots of times across this season.
Yeah.
And we'll be following Lazio.
I should have worn an Empoli shirt, but I don't have one. Because Livorno, Fiorentina, and Empoli, so it would have been, been on holiday in Tuscany, so it made sense,
Next time, don't worry. Okay, well, Adam, anything to say before I send these people home?
Just gutted we haven't got a Monday 5:30 p.m. kickoff, but never mind. For another game week, I'm sure it'll return, right?
I've been waiting for that one. I'll be waiting for it on my Monday afternoons. But guys, thank you for joining us. As always, hit the like and subscribe button down here if you're watching. If you're listening, give us a follow and give us a rating on your podcast app of choice. You can find us on Twitter or X at Italian Anglo Pod, and you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Anglo-Italian Pod. That's all for now, guys. We will see you next week. Ciao, a dopo.